Hi, everybody. Welcome to what would normally be a Friday morning interesting session as part of your ASM program. Normally, they leave Friday mornings of the last day of the entire program to me, and I'd walk in, and you'd all be in the conference room after having been together there all week, and Jay and David Nelson would say things that are way too nice about me. And then I'd walk up to the front of the room and I would say, we have 4 hours of time together, and I have prepared absolutely nothing as far as content for you this morning, which usually causes people to kind of look around and say, what are we doing? And then I'll explain that this is referred to as just-in-time education. Over the years, as we plan curriculum for ASM, and we've been doing this for nearly 2 decades, I think, at this point. And we really try to anticipate what you need to learn, what you're going to want to learn, what issues you're dealing with, and build a curricula that matches that. However, in a dynamic world, what we think you want to learn and what you think you need to learn and talk about are not always in sync. So we saved this last morning to co-create an educational experience together between you and me. And the way it usually works is we'll say, what do you want to talk about? What are the issues that are up for you? And I will get up on a white flip chart, and we'll make a list of whatever it is that's up for you. And then we will work together and create an instant, spontaneous education experience around these topics. And I apologize that I'm not able to be with you live on Zoom. That sounds weird to say. Today, the day you're watching this, Monday of this week, I had 2 brand new knees installed, and so at the moment while you're watching this, it's very likely that some physical therapist is torturing the crap out of me while I'm under the influence of opioid medication, so not in a good space to do a session or program with you. But I hope that you dive in and enjoy the experience with faculty that you've got here, or some of my lifelong friends and extraordinary folks. But I thought it might be interesting to replay some of the highlights that we have had come up time and time again as we've done these sessions over the years. So one of them that frequently comes up is, how do you optimize the annual performance evaluation process? I'm not sure why this is such a particular topic, but one of the things that's always fascinating about it is I'll ask people, in the group, and you can raise your hand right now while you're watching this on camera if you want. I'll ask, how many of you have received annual performance evaluations? Almost every hand in the room goes up. I said, how many of you have given them? And almost every hand goes up. And I'll say, so what value have they provided? How many of you have attributed your career's success and you achieving your potential based on getting annual performance evaluations? And maybe once every 3 or 4 years, one person will kind of timidly raise their hand and say, it's really been helpful for me. Most other people kind of roll their eyes at the process. And the problem with it is you end up making this grand assessment of somebody based on a very limited memory of your experience with them. My favorite example is I was doing consulting at a reasonably good-sized EMS service, and we were doing strategic planning in a boardroom. And on a break, I went to the bathroom and down and around the hall, and as I was coming back from the bathroom toward the boardroom, there was a young woman in a paramedic uniform standing in the hallway with a piece of paper in her hand, and she was cussing up a storm. I mean, she was just cussing like a banshee and flipping this paper, and I didn't work at this organization. I had nothing to do with personnel issues. I'd never seen this paramedic before, but I'm an empathic, compassionate sort of guy, and I said, seems like you're upset. She said, upset? I'm pissed off. And I'd been listening to her cuss for almost 2 minutes without repeating cuss words, which is a pretty impressive feat. Said, what's going on? She said, well, look at this. And she flicks this piece of paper and she shows me in her hand that she has a copy of her annual performance evaluation in her hand. And in the organization she worked in, they rate people on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being, you're so bad you probably should be fired, and 5 being, we should make you CEO of the company, you're extraordinary. And there are 14 different categories that they rate people on from 1 to 5. And I looked at her sheet, and she had scored 5 on all 14 categories. So she got, outstanding feedback on 14 categories, but she is pissed off. And I'm confused by this point. And I'm like, and at the bottom of the form, it has the raise that you can get. And the raise could be either 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5%. And she'd gotten 5%, the top raise that was available. So she'd gotten the highest score you could get on 14 out of 14 categories. And she got the highest raise you could get, which, the textbooks would say this should be motivational. And she was like, no. She was pissed. And I said she poked her finger at the signature at the bottom, which was her supervisor's signature. And she said, I have never met him. She looked at me. She said, are you him? I said, it's not me. Not me. And she said, how can this person who I've never met rate me on my customer service skills with customers, on my diagnostic acumen and all this kind of stuff? She was just as pissed off as she could possibly be. And when it comes to doing research on annual performance evaluations, there was a hospital in Pueblo, Colorado, Parkland Hospital. A friend of mine actually was CEO there at the time. And they really wanted to improve their annual performance evaluation system. So they hired a group of consultants, paid them $250,000 to come in and review and design this new system, and they implemented it. It just pissed off the whole workforce, and they figured out that they didn't hire the right consultants. So they went back out and searched and hired another group of consultants. They brought them in. They paid these folks $400,000. And, focus groups and surveys and meetings and small tests of change and all this happy hunky-dory stuff later on to implement a system that just pissed everybody off. And what they finally came to the conclusion was it's not possible to improve a process that's so fundamentally flawed as its base inception. It doesn't make any sense at all. So that's the wrap on annual performance evaluations. Another question that comes up frequently is, how do you motivate employees? And I'll walk around the room and I'll point to people and I'll say, so what motivates you? And you'll hear answers like, my daddy taught me to be proud of my work, or I do this for the satisfaction of making a difference in the world. And it's, other people will say it's my life's mission to care for the suffering, and occasionally one person will say, I do it for the money. It's like I usually say, if you do it for the money, you pick the wrong profession. EMS is not a path to riches for most of us. But then I stand back and I say, so if all of the people who answered that question were on my team, and I wanted to motivate you, what would I do? And then people in the audience would say, we have a pizza party on Fridays, or we give people red stethoscopes if they get signatures on their run forms. And I say, how many of you said you were motivated by pizza parties? Well, no, but how many of you said you were motivated by red stethoscopes and those kinds of things? And the common wisdom around motivating people it's just wrong. The way you motivate people, first off, you don't get to motivate people. Really, you get to demotivate people as a leader. So one of the first things you can do is go to your workforce and say, what are the things that piss you off, that demotivate you, that get in the way of you doing your best work? And then work together as a team to remove as many of those barriers as you possibly can from the workforce. That is a very useful exercise to do. But when it comes to actually inspiring people to do good work, the key is to actually get to know your people as individuals, because what motivates one person is not what motivates the next person, is not what motivates the night shift, is not what motivates your dispatchers, is not what motivates your EMTs. It's different for every individual. And so some people are motivated by feedback. Others are motivated by the ability to work on interesting projects. But you don't know until you've spent the time to get to know folks. And then that process of inspiring them to be able to do good work, removing the barriers to bad work, and non-manipulatively adding in the things that they're inspired to or that cause them to do things well is a good strategy. And I will leave you with, in this crazy time of COVID-19 and massive racial and social unrest in our country and murder hornets and trying to deal with your kids going back to school in the middle of all this craziness and trying to run EMS systems in the process. From the stress management perspective, I want you to know that you actually have control over your stress and your ability to do things. And something I want you to do right now, I want you to wiggle your toes with me. And some of you are going, oh, the hippie from California has told us to wiggle our toes. Jay, I thought this was supposed to be a professional session and education program. Well, it's interesting. When you look at the stress response, part of the physiologic stress response in the body is you decrease sensation in your extremities. And the reason for that is if a saber-toothed tiger was going to bite you, if your sensation is decreased in your arms and legs, it won't hurt as badly, and it will increase your ability to continue to try to get away and run or to beat up the tiger and not die in the process. So one of the practices for stress management is to fool your sympathetic nervous system, and to do so you want to kind of reverse those natural processes. So if you wiggle your toes, you're bringing attention to your extremities and activating the vagus nerve, stimulating the relaxation response through the parasympathetic nervous system, and it'll dial things down a little bit. And I shared this strategy on a webinar that I did with Lexapool that now over 20,000 people have viewed on video. And afterwards, I got an email from a guy who was an F-16 fighter pilot. And as he was getting ready to fly his first mission over Iraq, he's in his cockpit, and his flight commander is standing on one of those ladders up next to the cockpit and is giving him his last-minute flight instructions before closing the hatch for him to take off. And his flight commander was basically saying, give him the last-minute instructions that he said, now, before you take off, there's one thing I want you to remember to do throughout the flight. And he was thinking I should pay attention to my aileron, or I should always be aware of my wing tips and other aircraft off my wing tips, or things like that. And his flight instructor said, I want you to wiggle your toes throughout the flight. And he goes, you're telling me to wiggle my toes, what? And he said, if you wiggle your toes throughout this flight, more of your smart brain will be engaged in your control of the aircraft, your performance will improve, and your stress will decrease. And I shared that story. I was teaching stress management to the faculty for reproductive medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, and shared that story. And they said, when we are doing uncomfortable gynecologic procedures on patients, we always tell them to wiggle their toes during the process. It decreases their pain response, makes them more relaxed throughout it. So I hope you enjoy your just-in-time education program with the faculty here at ASM. And I wish you luck in your careers, and I hope you manage to stay virus-free throughout the rest of this pandemic. Thank you.